Welcome back. Today we're talking about repeaters. I'm not talking about kids who just repeat what you say to annoy you, but the technology used to amplify and boost a radio signal to get increased range. Before we dive in, let's discuss a few terms that we will use. If you're not familiar with radios, this is going to help as a little guide to contextualize what it is I'm talking about. First, we've got a channel. A channel and a frequency are not the same thing. A channel is a designation for a set of receive and transmit frequencies. These are commonly denoted as RX and TX. A channel must consist of a receive and transmit frequency to communicate. Without either one, you're operating with only half of what you need. You can't expect someone to respond when they can't hear you, and if you're talking to nothing, you certainly won't get a response that way. Secondly, we have frequency. Frequencies are the radio waves that are emitted. There are UHF and VHF frequencies, and that is a whole video in and of itself. But it's important to remember that frequencies exist on a channel. Now that we have that cleared up, we can talk about how they work. But for the sake of the viewer, I will only be speaking in terms of one channel to help conceptualize a little bit easier since this is such a heavy topic. RX and TX frequencies when using radios without a repeater need to be the same frequency to communicate. However, repeaters operate differently to boost the signal. So let's get into it. A repeater uses different TX and RX frequencies to communicate. So instead of having a frequency set of 464.55, you would have different frequency settings for both RX and TX, such as 464.55 and 469.55. Typically, repeaters are set to around 5 MHz difference. That makes them easy to identify when programming your portable radios so that they can communicate with your repeater. Theoretically, however, the frequencies can have a single decimal change and it would still work as it's a different frequency. Our repeater setups include what is referred to as a duplexer, as well as an antenna package. Duplexers enable both your TX and RX frequencies to receive using the same antenna instead of two separate antennas like a traditional setup, which ultimately cuts into installation time and it makes it easy. The antenna is connected by coaxial cable to the duplexer, and the duplexer is then connected to the repeater. The repeater is programmed to have opposite RX and TX frequencies from your radios. This is done so because of how a repeater works. Repeaters receive transmissions from radios at one frequency and then repeat the signal at a greater strength using a different frequency. This explains why your radios and repeaters will have opposite TX and RX settings so that the two can communicate with each other without creating a feedback loop. If a radio is transmitting on a certain TX frequency, if the RX frequency is the same, it would create a feedback loop and not allow transmission. So by changing the TX and RX frequencies, the repeater will receive a TX frequency and convert it to the corresponding RX frequency. Kinda lost? Well, let's see if I can break it down just a little bit further. Here is a set of frequencies used for a repeater: 464.55 and 469.55. The radios will need to be programmed to speak using RX 464.55 and TX 469.55. This will require the repeater to have the opposite frequency set. This is done to avoid the feedback loop I mentioned before, and it enables the repeater to do its job. By using a repeater with opposite TX and RX frequencies, the repeater can boost the opposite frequency and broadcast back to the transmitting radio without having to create that loop. This is heavy stuff, but you've pretty much already made it through. Repeaters are super helpful to broadcast further distances, but they do cost significantly more than simple radio setups. To learn more about repeaters, feel free to call one of our account managers today. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more information about all your radio needs. Thanks for dropping in. We'll see you next time.